My guest today is Tom Trowbridge. Tom, of course, is an entrepreneur. He's an advocate for decentralized systems. He's a co-founder at Fluence Labs and indeed at Hedera Hashgraph. Fascinating indeed. This should be a good one. But yeah, welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks, Andy. Thrilled to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thrilled to have you here, Tom. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show. It would be super cool if you could please introduce yourself, really. Would love to hear just some of your personal and professional backstory in the lead up to, I suppose the early days of Hedera and then Fluence.
I mean, let's see. How much time do we have?
Indeed.
I'm an old guy, so I guess I'd say life in the blockchain and crypto world started with Hedera. And pre-Hedera, I have been in technology, but with a finance orientation from the beginning. I did banking. I was at Goldman Sachs for a bunch of years, worked at some asset managers and funds. But, I spent 4 years in venture doing technology. When I was banking, it was focused on technology and telecom banking. So I learned enough to be dangerous, even though I'm not a developer by any means. And then I met Manson Lehman, who were the co-founders of Hedera Hashgraph, which was called Fluence Labs at the time. And I got to know them. And at the time, it was a white paper. And they brought me on to basically help found and launch the public ledger, which we then named Hedera. And so that was, I think, in late 2016, early 2017. And that was a all-out sprint, getting that network, launched from a standing start of a couple of people to hiring the team, bringing on the governing council, which is now, I think somewhat well known with Google, IBM, Nomura, a ton of businesses on it, raising a ton of money and launching everything. And I left in 2019 and I joined the Fluence Labs team, which are two other co-founders. And I joined as a co-founder myself, Dmitry and Evgeny, and solving a different problem, which was decentral. Hedera was a layer one consensus algorithm, but Fluence doing a different thing, which is a decentralized compute platform. And it's a very different thing than the on-chain layer one consensus, but a equally important problem to solve that a lot fewer people, if any, were targeting. So joined them in 19 and have been, racing and sprinting to build that ever since.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for bringing us nicely up to speed, Tom. And yeah, you're exactly right. So I guess Fluence Labs, I think, founded in 2019, all about reinventing or revolutionizing, giving an alternative to what we think of as cloud computing by essentially offering a decentralized serverless solution. But maybe you can kind of high level summarize and explain that a little bit better than I can, Tom. So maybe just, any way you want, identify the kind of the problems that exist with the traditional cloud computing centralized companies and what you're doing to tackle that as a good way in, perhaps.
Yeah, I think, if you back up for a second, let's define computing for people first. And so almost everything you do in the internet world requires computing. Now, some of that takes place on ever more powerful phones and computers in your home, right? So you're actually doing some of the math, some of the actual work of running an application. Some happens on a phone, but what's really happened and what you don't want to have happen is you to put in a command and have to travel to a company. And then the company performs the calc, sends something back to you, and it goes back and forth. It could have to traverse, thousands, hundreds of thousands of miles, right? Or tens of thousands of miles. So everyone has moved to the cloud. And the cloud is where almost all the applications that we use every day run. And that's where the compute happens. And the problem is that cloud is controlled by Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. They run 70, 80% of the cloud is those three companies. And the further problem is that even when we think of Web3, which is decentralized, if you're doing anything other than like DeFi on smart contracts, you are reliant on the cloud. And even DeFi, a lot of blockchain nodes are actually run in the cloud and cloud servers. So for our decentralized world, there is a massive centralization in these companies. And that's not because anybody wants to do that. That is just because because decentralizing that is difficult and people have focused on other problems first. And so that is where Fluence is focused, is decentralizing this compute component, which is a vast component. And when people think of decentralized compute, another nuance is they're focused. This is, we're focused initially on central processing unit CPUs. There are billions of CPUs around the world. That is what everything runs on. There also are GPUs, which is what AI runs on. And that is a big area of focus for some people in the decentralized compute landscape. And I think it's an incredibly exciting area. We're focusing on the CPU side, which is where almost everything runs. We're going to add GPU support soon. It's a similar kind of process, but we started on the CPU side. And so that is, and I'll phrase it even more starkly. If you can't decentralize compute, you really can't decentralize, period. And so decentralized compute, whether it's Fluence or others, is a necessary component for decentralization, just writ large, to be effective. And that is, I think, kind of what this a real kind of wake-up call for me. And I think for everyone to realize is that we need to be successful in architecting a solution for this.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent way of articulating it. Just dig into that then, Tom. So why is it important, just in a nutshell, to have, well, an alternative to, Amazon and Google and so on? What is the kind of dystopian worst case scenario if there isn't potentially a decentralized alternative?
Oh, this gets interesting. I think I will also look back at pretty much every large industry. And every large industry, as it grows, inevitably becomes intertwined with governments. And I think if you look at the US, the first example of this at scale is the railroads. And the railroads were pretty much the first massively relevant, important, scaled organization. And the railroads even have a pension system that predates the unions and has a whole set of laws entirely specific to railroad pensions because they were so important and so powerful at the time. And the government cared so much about them. And so this isn't the fault of any one person, right? There's no specific conspiracy. It's just, you're a big company, you have to deal with governments, and the governments want to have a relationship with the big companies, and it just sort of inevitably grows this way. And so this is even more the case and more important when it comes to information and everything related to our internet world. And so without decentralization, you end up with a full oligopoly with a couple of large companies controlling it, which effectively means that the governments control it. And so even if you don't worry about governments, Amazon has a 70 or 80 page term of service, which effectively allows them to turn you off and deplatform you for any real or even perceived violation of that terms of service, which means they can shut anybody off for any reason. And maybe you can appeal and whatever. And by then, who knows where your customers and your data and everything else has gone. So that is a massive amount of power to be focused in the hands of any company or any couple of companies. And when those companies are further intertwined with governments, that gets adds a whole nother dimension of danger and of risk to, I guess, enterprise in general.
Yep. Be useful also, Tom, to understand a little bit more about who are you building Fluence for? I mean, I suppose it would make sense, and I'm sure you are effectively building Fluence, with the end goal of, for everyone and everything. But I guess, there'll be multiple stages on that journey. So at the beginning stages, is it more for individuals, enterprise, government organizations? What are the different, customer or client target market buckets that you would kind of sector out the different early use cases?
The initial focus for us is certainly enterprises. And to make that clear, that's also the level we're using, the level we are demanding from our compute providers. And so when you think of decentralization, the image that pops into people's heads usually is consumer devices connected to provide some type of service. And that's true and that's effective and it works a lot. But Fluence, but as every decentralized network has grown, starting with, say, Bitcoin, it started off with consumer-grade machines, and over time, as the service has become more robust, has inevitably migrated to purpose-built data centers run by publicly traded enterprises that are incredibly specialized and focused on it. You've even seen it happen with Filecoin. Filecoin started off with people storing files on their home computers. They're now very sophisticated businesses whose only job it is to be Filecoin miners. And so we kind of wanted to shortcut that process and go straight to have top tier data centers hosting the Fluence compute or compute on Fluence, so that it was clear from day one that this was enterprise grade hardware with, SLAs that were the same as if you were using the traditional cloud. And we feel that's the only that skips or puts us way ahead of an adoption curve that normally would really take a long time to get the appropriate level of companies on board. And so that's sort of point one, is we've launched with, I think, 6 or 7, top tier data centers spread around the world that are the same data centers that, top Web 2 companies are in. And there's where our providers are hosting the compute. And we're using them to target first companies that do exactly what I mentioned earlier, that host basically servers and nodes for blockchain related companies. So the node hosting providers for whom our cost savings are considerable and the decentralization is a nice to have. And I think that will continue, and there's plenty of other use cases that move beyond it. But I guess I would say is that compute is not a service consumed by consumers directly. It's a service consumed and sold to enterprises who then provide their service to end consumers.
Yeah. And well, if that's the case, then Tom, who do you see yourself as competing against? Is it, your Amazons and your Googles and so on, or is it the other decentralized compute networks that there's a number of them? I'm sure you're much more aware of them than I am. Or is it all of the above, or are you doing your own thing? How do you think about this?
I guess what I'd say there is that the biggest competitor is clearly the centralized clouds, and of the decentralized kind of networks, almost all of them are focused on the GPU world. So there's almost no one focused where we are. That could change. It will change. That we don't view that as a a state of a perpetual state, but there could be 10 Fluences, could each be wildly successful, and we would still be a fraction of the cloud. And so the cloud market is just so enormous and growing so quickly that there is a tremendous opportunity for even a large number of competitors to be very successful in it. And so the answer is, we're competing against the cloud. If we were competing against many competitors, as we might in the future, that is not a concern.
Yeah. And look, not to get too technical, Tom, but I thought it was interesting. I saw that, it's in the documents on your website, but it just talks about how, most blockchain application platforms are based on, replicated ledgers. So of course you need the consensus algorithm to update the ledger. Depending on the ledger, when you want to do things, transactions, it can take time or not. But you talk about how Fluence takes a different approach to decentralized computation, where applications instead do not sit on top of the ledger. Instead, they're hosted off-chain. But I imagine that just makes speed and the reduction in costs much more efficient.
Yes. And so let me explain that for a minute, because that is a question which comes up a lot. And so when people think of blockchain related projects, they automatically think of things happening on chain. And that's, like Hedera is a layer one. There's a dozen layer ones everyone's familiar with. But compute and storage, have much more flexibility and much cheaper if you do not use blockchain. And I think people forget that decentralization existed long before Bitcoin, right? BitTorrent, highly scalable, successful, decentralized file sharing algorithm, had nothing to do with Bitcoin, way predated Bitcoin. And the first application at scale, Napster, also, right? Like had, I think Napster had something like 10 million, or no, like 50 million users, like some user count that dwarfs anything except, I guess, the largest exchanges in our world right now, right? And so that's just, I think, just people have to step back and kind of realize where we are in decentralized world. It's not just blockchain. And so, the analogy I use is Filecoin. Filecoin's files are stored off chain, but it uses blockchain to secure, to incentivize, to validate, and to reward. And so it uses the blockchain crypto world for its real strengths, but that's not storage. And so that is what Fluence does as well, is this is off-chain compute. And on-chain compute, which you would use in a smart contract, is a very effective decentralized compute alternative. But there's consensus overhead. It is, it is deterministic, which limits the amount of computation for which it is suitable, and makes it slower, etc. Happy for as much to be moved to smart contracts as possible. That would be terrific. But there are a lot of programs, most that are just not suitable for smart contracts, at least certainly not the way they are architected today. And so that is where compute that's off chain comes into play. And that's where Fluence is, the leading kind of provider of this decentralized compute. But when you have a token, we use blockchain where you want. You're verified that you are storing it via submitting proofs, and you're rewarded by tokens. The tokens make the whole thing work. You have to stake it. You have to stake tokens to prove trust, so that we know it's actually there. And if you don't provide that, if there's a false, you're slashed, right? So all of the incentive mechanisms, the security mechanisms, everything there is token and blockchain related, but the actual compute is happening off chain.
Yeah, very well explained. Thank you, Tom. And look, you mentioned the token. So Fluence has a token. I believe that's used by providers as collateral, but of course it's an incentive structure as well around that token. So maybe just explain how the Fluence token works, Tom.
Yes. Well, this is a really how do we want to phrase it, like a real thing of focus for me, I guess, a focus area at a minimum. And so, for one thing, in for decentralized, let's just say deep in cloud related networks, you need to provide trust. And so trust is usually, and we're part of this, provided by stake. So providers stake token to their hardware, their CPU, their whatever it is. And if they misbehave, don't provide the service, et cetera, that stake is then slashed, and that's an economic penalty. And that also provides assurance to an economic alignment, I should say, an assurance to the user that they're aligned and that they can trust this provider whom they may not have heard of, may not know, maybe in a different part of the world, et cetera, because they're economically linked via this incentive mechanism. That's not unique to Fluence. There's a variety of projects that do that. It's a well-architected and tried mechanism. What Fluence does differently, though, is our stake is denominated in dollars. So every CPU requires $12,000 worth of our token. which means that the token's $1, you need 12,000 tokens. Tokens 50 cents, you need 24,000 tokens. So that means, if the token drops or is low, and someone's adding stake, that it still costs $12,000 to secure the network, to secure the CPU. So your compute is still safe given that amount of dollars, that amount of value required. And versus other networks, which often just use a percentage of supply or a arbitrary number of tokens, which could be worth anything. And the other point of this is that rewards for people are in Fluence tokens, but also dollar related. So if you're adding your compute, you're paid $10 per core. It's about $600 per CPU per month. Again, in our tokens worth $1, you get 600. Tokens worth, $2, you get 300, et cetera. 50 cents, you get 1,200. And what that means is if you're a provider, you have a much higher certainty of receiving a dollar value that allows you to plan your business far in advance and make investments to be in business for a while. You're not dependent on a token pump or dump or speculation. And so that is our way of attracting people and providers who are more interested in a stable return and want to provide a solid service for that, as opposed to people building hardware for a token they hope will go up 50 times. And if it doesn't, they're out. And so that is, our learnings from a lot of previous projects as to things that can go right and things that can go wrong. And the other piece is that our stake, providers don't have to do that. Anyone can stake to a provider. And that we think is really important because it involves the whole community in staking. And it also reduces costs for providers who then don't have to go out and buy the token in order to secure the network. They can focus on running the compute, which is their core business. So long answer, but that is, it's integral to the security and the scale of the network.
Yeah. So anyone then can get involved in staking their tokens, should they so wish. But for people wanting to contribute their compute to the Fluence marketplace, what kind of, would they need to be a sizable entity for it to be worthwhile for them?
As of now, yes. And so we have a very long wait list of, I think, thousands of CPUs of both individuals with a large number or to even other providers who would like to join. Our providers would like to add, a lot more capacity as well. And so I think we will add providers that are really institutional quality and level kind of first. And then over time, we will open up the network. But I think we first have to prove that we can generate and operate at a, level that is similar to cloud performance in order to build trust with customers. And once we've done that, I think we will be able to open it up to more of the community, which is obviously our objective. We'd love to have thousands of people contributing compute, but if we don't get customers in here paying for compute, we won't get anywhere, right? So the focus first is we've got to get customers on board using this, and then we'll be able to scale it and involve a much broader group.
Got it. And, this is, I guess you see Fluence as part of the ever-growing DeepIn narrative, Tom. Of course, DeepIn has, been one of the forefront narratives of this year. Perhaps I expect that to continue. Just, any sort of wide-ranging thoughts on DeepIn, how you think about DeepIn, why that is not, why it's important for, the future of the world, if you like, not just what you are doing with Fluence, but, other important DeepIn projects as well.
Oh boy, I've got a lot. I mean, we even host a DeepIn day, and I even have a DeepIn podcast. And so I'm fascinated by this sector, decentralized physical infrastructure networks and what they are and mean. And to me, first, a definition, which I think is important because there's a lot of people trying to kind of be part of that space. I would characterize it as crowdsourced hardware put into a network or connected into a network that's secured, providing a service secured and incented by token economics. That to me is really, and there's a lot of applications to claim they're deep in, but they're not. I would kind of quibble with them a little bit, and so, but I'm a huge fan of it, and I think what I like about it is, and I'll return to token economics a bit, is that, and popular perception is that DePIN, I think, is an example of services that everyone can understand, right? Hive Mapper, if you get away from the cloud stuff like Fluence, which I say is not really there, but like a Hive Mapper, you put a camera in your car, it's mapped. Wingbits, you put an antenna on your roof, it tracks airplanes. Spexy drone mapping of the world. You know, GeoNet is RTK precision location to 3 centimeters on the world, right? So these are very tangible. Helium is, Wi-Fi and other kind of connectivity, right? So these are very tangible products that are way more precise, efficient than the centralized competitors that are offered at the same or even way lower prices. And to me, you're using no CapEx to provide a better service than the centralized competitors that is often way cheaper. So to me, that's super exciting. And then you add to that the token economics. These enterprises are very close, these projects, to generating real revenue. And most of that revenue across these projects is going to be used to buy and burn the tokens, which means that no one other person has to find that project you're invested in. If they're real revenue or buying and burning that token, then you've got a built-in demand for that, which should lead to it really performing. And so I think, my, sort of joke that crypto is really all memes. And it's really, you can take that either way you would. Memes are great. They're never going to go away. But it's surprising to see the level to which that is now risen to. And I think DePIN will obviously be meme-like at some point, but this revenue underpinning, I think, has the potential to detach this a little bit from the market, for better or worse, right? And really have projects with real value, really generating returns that are less meme oriented than ones that just kind of catch the attention and fancy of the crowds at certain points for different reasons.
Yeah, very well explained. DePIN, DePIN, and the memes. Yeah, bring on the memes. Look, feels like a nice place just to begin to finish off this part of the podcast, Tom. So please do that by just for anyone that wants to dig into what you guys are doing at Fluence. Please explain what is the best way for them to keep up to date with what you are doing. What should they do? Where should they go?
Well, Fluence.network is our website. That's easy. Fluence _project is our X or, and Telegram. Those are kind of the easiest places to find it. I am the Tom Tro on X. I think that's probably the place you find me. And I think those are really the two, X and Telegram are the easiest places to be in touch on us.
And of course, links are in the show notes. People. All right. Well, Tom, it is time to start to finish off the episode. And we do that, of course, by running you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it, Tom. I'm just going to run some questions at you. I just want you to give me your honest answers, hot take style, if you like. Let's see what you have to say. Question 1 for you is, Tom, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I'd say value is pretty high on the Bitcoin maxi spectrum, but in terms of store value, that's it, 100%. In terms of actual economic activity and use, zero other stuff. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but Bitcoin's own thing, value, no one's going to touch it, no one's going to compete with it, no one's going to get close to it. That's that. And then everything else, everyone else is just fighting over who's going to be used for what, when, and how.
Yeah. That's an excellent answer, Tom. And I'm not looking for any answer. It's just, I'm looking for your answer. That's what we want to hear. So the next question for you, Tom, is simply, what would you say is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
I think it's rather an controversial one, but that Bitcoin is a store of value. It is in price discovery mode. It will ultimately be worth many multiples of where it is now, and that it is the asset you do not want to trade. You just want to hold. And I think you can make far more holding, investing in other things, but you're taking very different risks. So Bitcoin is the asset to hold. If you don't want to think about it, worry about it, whatever, just hold it.
Yes, very, very well said. And you can still get pretty spectacular returns on Bitcoin just by doing nothing for 5 years, 10 years, perhaps. Yeah. Look, Bill Gates famously said, Tom, that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. As a technology, blockchain, internet network builder, you'll be very familiar with that kind of idea. But 10 years is indeed a long time. Look, anything you like here. Deepen, Fluence, DeFi, Web3, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
Listen, I think you'll have large Deepen successes in 10 years. I think you will have, I will go so far as to say, I think Deepen will outcompete in many sectors centralized competitors. And I think that it's not happening, but in 10 years, for sure, there are a variety of central competitors in a couple of sectors I mentioned will probably be competed away. So I definitely think is 10 years away. I expect DeFi to be significant, very, borrowing, lending, options markets on Bitcoin and all crypto to be order of magnitude more than is now. I expect leverage in the space to be way higher than it is now, for better or worse, right? But I expect leverage to be way higher. I expect a lot of real world assets to be trading on chain, whether they're stocks or whatever else. I'm not as sure about real estate, but other, financial instruments be tokenized, RWAs. I think that will be happening in 10 years for sure. And of course, I think you will have scalable, decentralized compute like Fluence that will be starting to be, we still won't have a dent in the centralized clouds, but will be big enough that it'll be not a question about the efficacy and value they will provide.
I love it. I love it. Tom, William Gibson famously said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. What's an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
I mean, the easy answer for that to me is stablecoins. And stablecoins are the unsung use case of crypto that no one talks about, but that are, tens or maybe hundreds of billions of dollars of value. And that has just snuck up on the world. And now I think people are quite aware. Some governments are starting to be aware of it, but that's just proving the ability and the speed and then ultimately the demand for that as a financing and transacting medium. And so that is a really, that is the future, and it's here, and it just isn't migrated to like stocks and other stuff. But that to me is the clearest example of the future. Just look at the market cap of Tether and USDC and look at the trading volumes and I don't think we would have expected that necessarily, a couple of years ago, but that has been a huge growth and success in our industry.
Yes, indeed. Very well said. And it brings us nicely to our final question, Tom, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
Easy answer. The Unincorporated Man. And this is a novel set in 1,000 years in the future of a guy who wakes up after being frozen and what this world is like. And this world forecasts tokenization because everybody is now partly owned by the state when they're born, et cetera, et cetera. VR got so real, society collapsed, it was outlawed. A whole number of interesting kind of components that I think this book was from like the early 90s that track and kind of really are a bit prescient about where we're going, at least in terms of the blockchain and crypto world, kind of unintentionally.
Fantastic. Just what was the title of the book again?
It's called The Unincorporated Man.
Fantastic. All right. We'll add that one to the list. We'll look that up. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tom, and thank you for spending some time with us today on the show. Just to close it out, again, please tell people where they can find you on X, and again, direct people to the various resources that are available on Fluence.network.
Yep. So Fluence.network, the website, core area, and then Fluence_project on X. And those are the easy ways to find us.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, Tom. All the best, and bye for now.
Great. Thanks, Andy.